Jack Nicholson's sister was actually his mother. This isn't a theory, it's confirmed truth that reads like fiction. Nicholson grew up believing his mother was Ethel Mae Nicholson, and his father was Donald Ferkillo. His older sister, June, was someone he loved and admired. Another sister, Lorraine, was also part of his family. In 1974, a Time magazine researcher investigating Nicholson's background for a cover story discovered the truth. Ethel Mae was actually his grandmother, and June was his biological mother. June became pregnant at 17 in 1936 and gave birth in 1937, when such circumstances carried massive social stigma. The family decided Ethel Mae would raise Jack as her own son to protect both June and Jack from shame. June moved to the West Coast, became a showgirl, and visited Jack regularly as his sister. Jack didn't learn the truth until he was 37 years old. Both Ethel Mae and June had died before he found out, June from cancer in 1963 and Ethel Mae in 1970, so he never got to confront them or ask questions. He stated that discovering this information didn't devastate him because he felt loved by both women throughout his childhood. The deception was born from love and protection, not malice. What makes this extraordinary is how completely the secret was kept. In small-town New Jersey in the 1930s and 1940s, somehow no one revealed the truth. Nicholson has rarely discussed it publicly, saying it's a private family matter despite being public knowledge. The revelation came right as he was becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars. It adds a layer of understanding to Nicholson's complex, often secretive characters throughout his career. Keanu Reeves. Kindness. Keanu Reeves' nice guy reputation isn't manufactured PR. The theory suggests his decades of kindness and generosity are completely genuine, which sounds impossible for a major Hollywood star. The evidence is overwhelming. In 1997, a paparazzo's camera broke while photographing Reeves. Instead of ignoring it, Reeves bought the photographer a new camera. He's been photographed countless times on public transportation, giving up his seat to others, never complaining about being recognized. When making the Matrix sequels, he took a pay cut of several $1,000,000, so the special effects team could be paid more, and gave each of the 12 stunt performers a Harley-Davidson motorcycle as gifts. The total cost was over $1,000,000 from his own pocket. After his sister Kim was diagnosed with leukemia in the 1990s, Reeves quietly funded cancer research for years. Running a private foundation he refuses to attach his name to publicly, he's donated millions to children's hospitals without seeking recognition. In interviews, crew members and co-stars consistently describe him as humble, prepared, and respectful. Sandra Bullock revealed that after she mentioned never trying champagne and truffles during a speed conversation, Reeves showed up at her door days later with both. He didn't stay, just dropped them off. Construction workers, waitresses, and random people in airports have posted stories about encounters with Reeves where he was patient, kind, and treated them as equals. The theory is that this isn't an act. For 30-plus years, not a single person has contradicted this image. In an industry built on carefully managed personas, Reeves' consistency suggests authenticity. The alternative is that he's maintained the most elaborate deception in Hollywood history without a single crack. Daniel Day-Lewis transformation. Daniel Day-Lewis's method acting transcends performance into something closer to temporary identity dissolution. The theory argues he doesn't act, he becomes, and the transformation is so complete that it borders on psychological danger. For My Left Foot, in 1989, Day-Lewis played Christy Brown, an artist with cerebral palsy. He stayed in a wheelchair for the entire shoot, refusing to leave it between takes. Crew members had to lift him and carry him around set. He learned to paint with his left foot. He would only eat meals if someone spoon-fed him. The film's director, Jim Sheridan, said Day-Lewis broke 2 ribs from contorting his body to maintain the physical posture. For Gangs of New York, he caught pneumonia because he refused to wear a warmer coat than his character would have worn in 1862. He wouldn't use modern medicine and walked around the streets with his character's accent for months. When preparing for Lincoln, he stayed in character for nearly a year. He would only communicate via text messages written in Lincoln's voice and speech patterns. Sally Field, playing Mary Todd Lincoln, said it was unnerving. He sent method texts to Steven Spielberg addressing him as if he were a Civil War general for There Will Be Blood. He lived alone in rural Texas for months before filming, practicing the voice and physicality obsessively. His son visited during Last of the Mohicans, and Day-Lewis, as Hawkeye, taught him to skin animals and live off the land. After filming Phantom Thread in 2017, Day-Lewis announced his retirement from acting at age 60. He gave no detailed explanation, but those close to him suggested the process had become unsustainable. The theory is that Day-Lewis loses himself so completely in roles that returning to himself becomes traumatic. He's not acting, he's fragmenting his identity temporarily, and after 3 decades, he couldn't do it anymore. Joaquin Phoenix Letterman. Joaquin Phoenix's 29th appearance on Letterman was performance art for his film I'm Still Here. On February 11, 2009, Phoenix appeared on Late Show with David Letterman, looking disheveled, with long hair and a massive beard. He wore sunglasses, mumbled incoherently, and barely responded to questions. He claimed he was retiring from acting to become a rapper. Letterman mocked him relentlessly. The audience laughed uncomfortably. It seemed like a complete breakdown. Phoenix's behavior had been strange for months. He'd given bizarre interviews, performed rambling rap at Las Vegas clubs, and looked physically unhealthy. The theory immediately emerged that it was all fake, performance art being filmed for a mockumentary by Casey Affleck. Phoenix and Affleck denied this repeatedly throughout 2009. Phoenix maintained he was genuinely pursuing a rap career. Then I'm Still Here was released in September 2010, and Phoenix admitted the entire thing was staged. He'd spent nearly 2 years in character, or had he? Some believe the "it was performance art" reveal was actually damage control. They point to how genuinely uncomfortable Phoenix looked in certain moments, how the film itself is chaotic and unfocused, and how Affleck's later admission that some parts were real contradicts the all-fake narrative. Phoenix gave conflicting explanations in interviews. Sometimes he'd say it was completely scripted, other times he'd suggest he lost control of the project. Letterman later said he didn't know what to believe. The sexual harassment allegations against Affleck during I'm Still Here production add darkness to what was supposedly satire. The theory has 3 possibilities. 1. It was entirely performance art. 2. It started as performance art, but Phoenix genuinely struggled. 3. It was a real breakdown that was retroactively framed as art to save Phoenix's career. Phoenix won an Oscar for Joker a decade later, playing a man whose reality and performance blur together, which feels almost too perfect. By the way, if this is the kind of content you're into, I make videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really mean a lot. Marlon Brando cards. Marlon Brando refused to memorize lines and read from cue cards, hidden everywhere on set. This started as rumor, then became confirmed fact, then became legend as the extent of it was revealed. Brando believed memorizing lines made performances stale and preferred spontaneity. During The Godfather, in 1972, he had lines taped to other actors' bodies, to props, and around the set. Francis Ford Coppola confirmed this but defended it, saying Brando's readings felt more authentic. On Apocalypse Now, Brando arrived massively overweight and hadn't read Heart of Darkness, the novella the film was based on. He refused to memorize the script. Coppola had to improvise Brando's scenes, and crew members held up cue cards just off camera. Brando would read them while delivering his performance. For Superman in 1978, Brando demanded outrageous fees and minimal work. He suggested playing Jor-El as a bagel or a green suitcase to avoid appearing on screen. When that was rejected, he wore cue cards on baby Kal-El's diaper during the Krypton scenes. By the 1990s, the cue card system was absurd. On the island of Dr. Moreau in 1996, Brando wore an earpiece and had someone read him lines in real time, which he'd repeat. He didn't even read cue cards anymore. He'd glance at them, improvise around them, or ignore them entirely. Val Kilmer, his co-star, said Brando would sometimes just make sounds instead of dialogue. The production was chaos. Director Richard Stanley was fired after days. Brando arrived with his own ideas about playing Moreau as surrounded by tiny people, which made it into the film. He insisted on wearing an ice bucket on his head in one scene. None of this was scripted. The theory that Brando was a genius rebelling against Hollywood convention transforms into the reality that by the end, he simply didn't care. He took massive paychecks and did whatever he wanted, and productions accommodated him because his name still meant something. It's less rebellion, more decay. Crispin Glover Letterman. Crispin Glover's infamous 1987 Letterman appearance was staged performance art. On July 28, 1987, Glover appeared on Late Night with David Letterman to promote a film. He wore a wig and platform shoes, spoke in a bizarre, affected voice, demonstrated a strange karate kick, and nearly kicked Letterman in the head. Letterman appeared genuinely uncomfortable and eventually walked off set. NBC cut to commercial early. The segment became legendary. The debate continues. Was Glover having a breakdown, or was this planned? Glover has given contradictory explanations over the years. Sometimes he says he was in character, performing as a persona he'd created. Other times he suggests it was genuine expression of his artistic philosophy. Letterman's people claimed it was real, and that Glover was unstable. However, behind-the-scenes footage shows Glover being calm and normal immediately before going on stage, then switching into the character. He'd performed similar personas in clubs and art spaces before. The kick toward Letterman looks choreographed in slow motion, perfectly calculated to come close without connecting. Glover sued NBC when they aired the footage in later retrospectives without his permission, suggesting he maintained creative ownership of the performance. Letterman later said he didn't know what was real. What makes this particularly fascinating is that regardless of intent, it worked. Glover's avant-garde reputation was cemented. He became known as Hollywood's eccentric genius. The ambiguity is the point. Glover has spent his career exploring the space between sincerity and performance, reality and fiction. The Letterman incident perfectly encapsulates his artistic mission, making audiences question what they're watching and why they're watching it. Unlike Phoenix's Letterman appearance, which was eventually explained, Glover's remains intentionally unresolved. Andy Kaufman alive. Andy Kaufman faked his death and might still be alive. The comedian died from lung cancer on May 16, 1984, at age 35, but substantial evidence suggests this was his greatest prank. Kaufman was legendary for blurring the line between performance and reality. He created elaborate characters like Tony Clifton, an obnoxious lounge singer that Kaufman would insist was a completely different person. He'd have Clifton perform, while Kaufman was visibly in the audience, using his writing partner Bob Zmuda or others in the costume. He staged fake fights with professional wrestler Jerry Lawler that fooled audiences for years, including a fake hospitalization after Lawler injured him. Before his death, Kaufman told multiple friends he was considering faking his own death as the ultimate performance piece. He said he'd reappear 20 years later, which would have been 2004. His girlfriend Lynn Margulies confirmed he discussed this plan seriously. In November 2013, his brother Michael brought a young woman on stage at an Andy Kaufman tribute event, claiming she was Andy's 24-year-old daughter and that Andy was alive, writing screenplays in New Mexico. The woman later admitted she was an actress hired by Michael, but this only deepened the mystery. Was Michael covering for Andy, or was this itself a prank? The timing of the hoax, nearly 30 years after Andy's death, seems too deliberate. Some believe Michael was testing the waters to see if the public would accept Andy's return. No public autopsy was performed. The funeral was closed casket. Only close family members claimed to have seen the body. For a man who dedicated his life to elaborate deceptions that spanned years, faking terminal illness and orchestrating a fake death wouldn't be impossible. Kaufman studied transcendental meditation and Eastern philosophy, which sometimes involves retreating from public life. His style of comedy was so committed to the bit that he'd endure being hated if it served the performance. If anyone could successfully fake their death and stay hidden for 40 years, it would be Kaufman. River Phoenix death. The circumstances surrounding River Phoenix's death outside the Viper Room contain unexplained elements that fuel ongoing theories. Phoenix died on October 31, 1993, at age 23, from a drug-related incident outside the West Hollywood nightclub owned by Johnny Depp. The official story is that Phoenix consumed a speedball, a combination of cocaine and heroin, and collapsed on the sidewalk. His brother Joaquin called 911 in a panicked, heartbreaking recording that became public. However, several facts don't align neatly. Phoenix was a vocal advocate for clean living, veganism, and environmental causes. Those close to him insisted he rarely used drugs. Samantha Mathis, his girlfriend who was with him that night, said someone gave Phoenix something at the club, and his reaction was immediate and severe, suggesting he didn't know what he was taking. The Viper Room had a reputation as a place where drugs flowed freely among celebrity clientele. John Frusciante, Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist, was reportedly there that night and later admitted his own heavy drug use during that period. Some theories suggest Phoenix was given a contaminated or unexpectedly strong substance. Others point to the club's ownership and the powerful Hollywood figures who frequented it, suggesting a cover-up to protect reputations. Depp has rarely discussed that night in detail. The paramedics who responded reported the scene was chaotic, with multiple people clearly intoxicated. Phoenix was pronounced dead at the hospital at 1:14 a.m. No thorough investigation into who provided the drugs was ever publicized. The case was closed relatively quickly. Phoenix's family has maintained privacy about the details, which some interpret as accepting the official story, while others see it as pain-driven silence. The theory isn't that his death was anything other than a drug-related incident, but that the full context of how it happened, who was responsible, and what substances were actually involved has never been fully revealed. Shia LaBeouf art. Everything controversial Shia LaBeouf does might be intentional performance art. LaBeouf's transformation from Disney Channel child actor to avant-garde artist has been so extreme that the line between genuine breakdown and calculated performance has vanished. In 2014, he wore a paper bag over his head, reading, "I am not famous anymore," to a film premiere for Nymphomaniac, then sat in a Los Angeles gallery for 5 days in an installation called I Am Sorry, letting people do anything they wanted to him. Visitors could sit across from him, stare at him, touch him, or talk to him, and he'd remain silent and motionless, often crying. He plagiarized Daniel Close's comic for his short film, HowardCantor.com, then apologized by plagiarizing other famous apologies. When confronted, he hired a skywriter to write, "I am sorry, Daniel Close," in the sky above Los Angeles. In 2017, he launched He Will Not Divide Us, a 4-year live stream intended to protest Donald Trump's presidency. The camera was mounted outside a New York museum with the instruction to repeat the phrase, "He will not divide us," into the camera. Internet trolls from the message board site 4chan turned it into chaos, showing up to disrupt it constantly. When it was shut down, LaBeouf moved the project to Albuquerque, then to an undisclosed location in Tennessee, showing only a flag against the sky. 4chan users triangulated the location using flight patterns, star positions, and background sounds, then drove there and stole the flag. LaBeouf has been arrested multiple times for public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and altercations that seem almost too perfectly timed with his career moments. His method acting extremes include pulling out his own tooth for fury, cutting his face repeatedly for Lawless, and dropping acid for the necessary death of Charlie Countryman. He's worked extensively with performance artists Nastya Sada-Runka and Luke Turner on projects that explicitly blur life and art. The theory suggests LaBeouf is creating a decades-long conceptual artwork about fame, masculinity, vulnerability, and celebrity self-destruction. He's stated in interviews that he no longer distinguishes between his life and his art. The question becomes, if someone is genuinely struggling with addiction, mental health issues, and trauma from childhood fame, but is also consciously framing those struggles as art, which is it? Can it be both? LaBeouf's entire existence has become an unreliable narrator situation where even his admissions of performance could be performances themselves. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.